Hi, this is Saturday, April 22nd or 23rd, depending on which continent you're on. And we're doing our Bucky meeting on critical path, and had a couple technological issues here at the beginning. So I hope everybody that was that linked in on time is able to join us, because my link didn't get started until a few minutes after the appointed time. Manu, it's early in South Africa. How are you feeling, and what do you expect for today?
I'm feeling good. I was wondering what was happening to you.
Yeah.
Because I had message the host I lost connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to send a message to Joe when you since you're not on WhatsApp. So everything is fine. I'm happy that we're here. Yeah, I'm just really getting ready for this critical path. I'm on the tracks. And I expect to go that it takes me anywhere.
Cool.
So cool. That's what I expect. Suzanne, how do you feel about this one?
I'm glad to be here. I have spent the day doing physical work, digging a hole in my yard to plant an acerola cherry tree. And it is caliche out there, so which is a technical term for kind of like solid rock. So I've spent the entire day and I almost got 3 feet down. But sometimes it's good to work. And I just know that we're going to get my perspective expanded, which is always the whole big point of this. Joe, how are you feeling? And please be safe driving. What would you like to get out of today?
I'm feeling great. I mean, I really just, I'm very fortunate. I just have come from a concert, and now spending time with my group, my favorite group, and so it's been a very good day, very good day. It was a really good concert. And then, so as far as tonight, I'm just, looking to continue to move through critical path. I'm excited to get started actually as soon as so I'm looking forward to this evening. Steve, how you feel? And what would you like to say?
Well, I'm delighted I finally got my technical issues resolved, and here we are. John has contacted me and said he won't be here today. Anne contacted me and said, in fact, she contacted several people here, said that won't be here for the next couple of weeks. And so that's kind of where we are. And several people who put tentative will attend in the past declined or didn't reply this week. So I think this is us on the call today. And I'll tell you, I'm always delighted to read Buckminster Fuller. Last week, everybody's contributions were just so marvelous about the history of China and what went on in 1433. In terms of China ending up letting their ships, they burned the ships that were at their own ports and let their ships rot at foreign ports because they decided that being in touch with the world just wasn't worth it.
And I think they might have burned the treasure too.
Oh.
Didn't want those foreign objects coming into their country. It was over a decade since I read this. 1492 was the initial book, and then there was another book shortly after, and then a National Geographic special. So I don't have quite the recall I wish I did, but yeah, it was an eye-opener. It very enjoyable. I listened to it and certainly would recommend it.
Yeah, and see, this is on what streaming service?
So I listened to it on audible.com.
On Audible.
Yeah,
So it was a book.
it's a book. Yeah.
Okay. And the book was named, I'm sorry, I didn't missed it.
1492.
1492. That's when I thought Columbus sailed in 1492. So it was all about Columbus and misinformation and false news that we've been receiving for the last couple hundred years. Is that what?
It's interesting who writes history.
Yeah. Well, and I think Howard Zinn and has made a statement about that, and it's become pretty much knowledge that the winners write the history based on what they want the losers to think.
And interesting, I heard on the radio that there's a group, one of them is in Philadelphia, that right now is going back and archiving as much as they can find of journalism from Russia, Soviet Union, because they're realizing that everything's being destroyed.
Wow. Well, Google has done some kind of a job in the US gathering up documentation for the last 10 or 20 years. That's been their goals, to have everything online. And that democratization of knowledge is really powerful.
Only if it's not censored.
Yeah, only if it's not censored. And I think everybody just really acknowledges the Gutenberg press and how it made literature available to everybody. And then I look back as part of this discussion and see, well, let's see, what did they print? Well, they printed the Bible, the King James version of the Bible, right? And then what they did print was what the establishment was willing to support, whether it was the aristocracy that were putting out something. And now there's a new movie called Chevalier. Have you heard of this movie? I think I said it right. Chevalier, who is what's all about a black violinist who actually from what I understand was before Beethoven or Mozart, and that music was influenced a lot by that dude, and he was a black guy and was, nobody wanted him so there's a movie out about that now. I'll tell you, history,
the trailer is he's quite hot.
He's quite hot. Yeah, I think that's what anyway. So what amazes me now, so history is interesting. And then what amazes me now is when I take the Cultural Revolution with Mao Zedong in China together with the 1433 burning of all the ships, and I take a look at how China is presented today and their determination to maintain their boundaries, including Taiwan. I think of China just seems to have a historical long-term perspective that of which Western culture has no concept. And we're looking at our neighbors whom we want to call enemies, and we're looking through them through a bias. Wow. I thought last week's conversation with all of you folks was absolutely enlightening for me and made a major difference. Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
Well, I was just going to type something.
Okay.
So according to you, all of this discussion that we have, what principle are we actually kind of realizing that is around? What is it?
Well, lag comes up for me. 1433 burning the ships. It's now 2023. Good. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. That's 600 years of propaganda. What did you have in mind, Manu?
Now, I would like to hear from Susan and Joe first.
Okay.
Then I see if what I'm thinking is rubbish.
No. So for me, and it's been buzzing particularly loud in this past couple of weeks, is just perspective. A point that, you can only see from your local. It's a moment. You got to be local.
Joe, do you have anything?
I couldn't hear for a minute. So I just could hear you now. Forgive me.
Okay, the question is, go ahead, Manu.
No, go on.
Well, Manu is asking what principle of Bucky seems to manifest or become obvious as we discuss the history of the world and the Chinese culture and what they did in 1433, what they did in the Cultural Revolution of in the 1960s, 70s with under Mao Zedong, and then just that perspective on China and in history in general. Is there a principle of Bucky that comes up for you? Did I say that right, Manu?
Mm.
That's a generalized principle that that comes up for me when I'm thinking about China in particular. Really have to think about that. Because I keep thinking about the principles that we've been covering with Wayne actually, and I think that there's as far as China goes, I really think it's really hard for me to pick one Bucky principle because I'm trying to think of it in terms of he kind of looks at things regeneratively, and I don't see China in that, at least since in the Cultural Revolution, maybe earlier than that, looking at the world that way. So I would have to say principle of leverage maybe I've been thinking about a lot lately, but that's just one thought that I would say. And the reason I would say that is that in a bad way that it's actually been used in the way leverage has been used maybe against the general public. But I would have to really think about it a little bit more deeply, to be quite honest.
That's
Give
cool.
me 3 minutes.
That's okay. What do you have in mind, Manu?
Okay, let's just put it. Let me take
Because
two
what you're
things that you
asking-
say.
What you're asking is a pretty deep question, so I don't blame Joe for digging deep. Go ahead.
But I take it from you. You say history books are written by victors.
Mm.
So they determine the term of how we see the world.
Yeah.
And then you say China's perspective versus US's, this is Western.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you, so the word I wanted to hear from you is cycles.
Okay.
And then if there are cycles, there are phases.
Mm.
And the danger of being locked into a phase.
Yeah.
That's what pops up to me. And if you read people like Ray Dalio, they are very, very big on it. Very big. He say, you have long cycle. And I mean, basically, it determines 4 things. He say, usually, the victor comes it and does abuses. Is in a privileged position and get into debt. Right? He gets into debt. He spends more than he earns. And this has been through history. And then there is a second thing. Because it does that, internally, you start having conflicts, internal conflicts, polarizations. The truth is with me and not with you internally. Externally, there is competition over time that comes because the others don't want, those who were vanquished yesterday, they are striving for power. And then they develop and they start challenging the victors of yesterday. And then the fourth thing is the ingenuity of, technology, doing things, ephemeralization, basically. And those four combine into cycles. So the longer cycle, and then they are intermediate, and then they are shorter cycle. For example, the economic cycle that we see are shorter cycle, 3 to 7 years, on average 5 years, that you have expansion and contraction. Death cycles are, in contrast, things that goes over 100 years, 80 years, is a generation. That's when you see depression. So that's where I was. I don't want to go because it's going to take us into many, many things. But what popped up to me while you share and Susan share was, say, for example, today the US is kind to be trapped in a cycle, in a phase, and unable to accept that the phase is phasing out, and that there's going to be something different. China has a perspective of 300 years of humiliations, or 100 years. Is that what is it? The Opium War, when was it?
I remember the 1840s. I'll double check.
Yes. So you see Chinese perspective, their reference. China is emerging from that 100-something years.
My gosh, you guys.
200 years.
The Opium Wars were from 1839 to 1842. And
so that's 200 years, almost.
Wow.
The US is living mid-30s to today, right? And that is the average duration of power, of the hegemon in the world, those who make the rule. That's about that. If you look into history, that's the way it is. And Ray Dalio has gone deep into those things. Joe, you should know a lot about it, right?
Yes.
Ray Dalio and the cycles.
Yes, it actually talks about it. I still need to read his latest. There you go.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, and my point though was a little bit different because usually I think in terms of cycles, but if we look at Chinese history, their reaction to the exterior world in 1433 was the same as it was in 1960 with the Cultural Revolution, and then we expect them to be different today. I think that out of all these cycles, the Chinese perspective has been fairly consistent since 1433. We don't want to have anything to do with those people. And they can—
But look at it geographically, Steve. Compare China geographically to the US and see what it means. To the south,
we always consider China the other side of the world.
Yeah, I mean, no, but this is it. You have the Himalayan mountains to the southwest, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That goes into the high, whatever, towards the north until you get more to Mongolia. So geographically, that valley of China where you have the Yangtze and all of these rivers is protected. To the north is Siberia. Okay. And to the east is the Pacific Ocean. That is something, isn't it? In terms of entity, in terms of population, in terms of whatever it is, you have a natural setting for some kind of tending to homogeneity of humans that live in the environment. At least the development of a group that has a big quantum and that, how will I say it? That will develop something, a view that lasts longer than in other places. So you have the physical in the US that is driven by expansion west, and then there's these Rockies. Let's climb the Rockies and see what is in there. And then you start going down into the valleys in California on the coast.
Yeah.
It's still expansion, then the ocean, and then all of these things. Right? And if you look at the density of population, the US is sparse compared to China, and that encasing, that concave, that allow the flow and the accumulation of population, of civilization, of culture, or whatever that you want.
Right on.
Hey, Richard, how are you?
Are you complete, Manu?
Yes, I am.
Good. Let's, I want to just say one thing in regard to what you said, and then we'll invite Richard to share how he's feeling and what he expects to get out of the day. Richard, we just jumped right into in a review after sharing about my epiphanies about China. And then Manu started talking about cycles and different kind of Bucky principles that came out of last week's meeting. So if you want to think about Bucky principles that came out of last week's meeting, please feel free to contribute when you share. Let me just respond to Manu. Manu, I love the idea of cycles. I love everything you're saying about expansion and everything. What seems to be my epiphany about China was China is not driven by these cycles, or doesn't seem to, or when they do, they cycle back. In other words, America is what, 200 years old? How, let me see, 17, 18, 19, 20. We're 300 years old, maybe. And America was driven by innovation. I mean, nothing in America is older than 400 years old or 300 years old, where China in 600 BC had Confucius, and today they're still teaching Confucius. This is 2,600 years of the same stuff. And if you take the Confucius together with the fact that they burned their own ships because they didn't want to have anything to do with Western civilization, 1423, you take a fact that they burned anything Western that they could find in China in the 1960s with the Mao Zedong revolution, that culture seems to be committed to staying isolated and staying, I don't know, is pure a racist genocide, genophanetic, yeah, I don't know. They just seem to be not cyclical very much at all. And that was my point. So I appreciate your point too. So Richard, how are you feeling? And what do you expect to get out of tonight? And having done those two things, what did you have anything that you got, or any principles of Bucky that you recognized may have come out of last week's meeting? And we're so glad you made it.
Yeah, I'm so glad I did too. And excuse my voice. I've lost it over the last 3 days. I've been at the American Association of Suicidology's conference with about 1,500 to 1,600 people present. I don't know how many online, and it's been a great week. And for me, it was an absolute surprise because the Living and Works organization is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, which is the 40th anniversary of Bucky's death, which is the 40th anniversary of BFI. And if I go back to 1927, it's whatever the year that is, anniversary of him considering suicide on the edge of Lake Michigan. And I was absolutely blown over and surprised that I got one of the association's major awards. I had no idea, no clue, no inkling, no nothing. So I'm sort of on cloud nine over the fact that that happened. But also something that might be related to what we're talking about. We had our group of people from Australia presenting, and we have just recently worked with Indigenous people in Australia and indigenized one of our major training programs to a great amount of success. And they were presenting a keynote presentation, and they gave some history. And the history that they were giving vis-a-vis what we've just said about US history and China history. Well, the Aboriginal people in Australia are celebrating their 60,000th year anniversary. So they've been around for a while. And so it's pretty exciting to be on this call in the context of Australia, and to have heard this presentation that was given to, as I say, a room full of probably 1,500 people, explaining the civilization history of the Indigenous people of Australia and their oral traditions and so forth. So it's, and what do I expect to get out of today? Well, I suppose if I have to be honest about it, what I want to get out of today is a little R&R and just enjoy the company of our discussions and the kinds of things that relate to Bucky. And I am now in a place where an awful lot of Bucky's thinking that has been transformed into our work in suicide prevention is now getting out, and people are understanding it as Bucky related sort of foundation and principles. So I'm so glad that I finally found the way to connect, and I missed the update link when I tried to get on. Thank you. This is wonderful.
Wow, great to have you on, Richard. Did you have any? I mean, I know you're in kind of an overwhelm, want some R&R, so I won't tax your brain any further. We're just glad you're here. Manu, did you want to wrap up any of your points you were making, or summarize anything, or are we good to start our reading?
Just, I don't want to get into controversy with Steve, but read what I put in the South China. So if they were so low, how comes it that they're an elite in AI?
Yeah, that's a big point.
How comes it that, for the semiconductors, Taiwanese are not Westerners, they're Chinese. Culturally, more culturally so than the Communist Party in China tried to abolish culture. That's what they tried to, and they didn't succeed.
But didn't the Taiwanese embrace the Western culture? To some degree.
They're like Japanese. Are Japanese Western? No.
Oh,
Japanese are able to grasp the principles. A principle is not cultural.
Then we guess
the principle is true everywhere, yes. So you grasp the principle, and then you use your social strengths to plot forward with them. You get what I'm trying to say? You want to build a house. If I want to build a house in the US, for example, I need the best contractor to build me the house, to render what I've designed in the US context. If I want to build the same house in some other places, I need the community to come together with their ingenuity, organized to deliver that for me, because there's going to be reciprocity. You get my point? Culture, if you get to the point where you are in a position, right, to discern principles and understand them, and then use your local strength, that is a culture, to put your culture into phase with the culture, with the principle, there's nothing that stops you. the sky is your limit. But if you come at an angle of it, there's a problem, because it's always going to react against the principle, which is immutable. The principle is there and always there. We keep on bouncing against principles because we're driven by our local condition, physical, cultural, and invention that we do in trying to do things, but sometimes, most of the time, inadvertently against the principles that are available. Let's recognize that there's too much money printed in the world today that has diluted the values to many, many people. That's true. There's too much debt. You can't avoid that. Whatever technology that you use, it is true to most people that there's too much debt. So you have to recognize that and say, okay, if we have this, we know that there are these consequences. Is inflation, because it has happened in the past and in the past and in the past again, like that. So it must be driven by a certain principle. And then how do we cope with in the best light of new knowledge that we have today? We are able today to encapsulate the information, historical information that used to take armies of priests, armies of whoever were entrusted with the data to try to extract the fine thing there to be applied. Today we have computers that can crunch those numbers and come up with trends. And our job is just to see. That's the role. That's what Bucky calls the role of the local problem solver. No, winnower, storer, transmitter, receiver, storer, transmitter, and tinkering in the you call this like patching locally, right? In support of the integrity of eternally regenerative universe. In support. Because what is happening is that we are like wings on the shape of history. It's like a small unconformity. And our role is to make sure that that unconformity, local, is still in line with the general trend. Otherwise, we'll perish as a species. Did I wrangle or did I say anything that makes sense?
I think you said a lot that actually makes sense. The one thing that I'm thinking about is what you put in the chat. How China, I can see how they can lead in semiconductors, but I am very surprised actually how they lead in AI.
Oh yes, they publish it. Look at the publications.
No,
Yeah.
it's true. It is. I mean, it's true.
And,
The reason I say that is because we're going back to cycles, and if we think of cycles, one of the things that's important about cycles is that that America's actually was good at is that they allow things to die and be reborn. And that's regenerative. Like now, what I mean by that is now we've been devaluing our currency in various different ways, whether it be through interest rates or through bailing out banks, and not necessarily allowing them to go through the cycle of actually needing to reorganize themselves. But I don't see China necessarily allowing their cycles to their business cycles to progress through nature. I'll just say that. And they do have issues. They have a lot of issues, but it is surprising to me that they are able to lead in something like AI. And that's why when I struggled to apply Bucky's principles to China in particular, because I don't see what they do as necessarily regenerative. But again, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but the AI aspect of it is really surprising because it's an innovation. And China has not necessarily always been good in that. In fact, I would say they copied our financial model in order to spur innovation. They pulled it back, meaning venture capital. They actually had their own way of investing in companies in order to accelerate their innovation. They pulled it back recently, about, I guess, 2 years ago, the percentage of venture capital that they were using, but in investing in new companies. But it's just surprising to me that they've actually been able to and you're right, Manu, they have been able to take the lead in AI. But I really do struggle to apply Bucky's principles to their current environment.
Let me,
I make a comment.
are you saying, Joe, that China is ahead of the US in terms of AI development?
That's I don't have detailed information regarding that, but that is that does seem to be the consensus amongst people that I have spoken to.
Wow, because I've been listening to my only contact is Lex Friedman and Sam Altman and Eliezer Yudkowsky and these dudes who are so big on Chat GPT. They've never mentioned China as an element. They think they're at the forefront of it. So I'm really surprised to hear that China has any kind of. In fact, according to the information I've received, propaganda maybe that I've received, I mean, a big thing is on Chinese corporate espionage, and the fact that that some guy just sent to prison for 25 years because they were trying to find out how to do build composites, metallurgical composites to build rotors on jet engines, that they didn't have the technology from Lockheed or whatever else. And I got details on an active espionage program where they invite native Chinese people. They tell them that even though they're in America, they're American citizens, they're still Chinese, and they invite them back to give presentations on the technology in China in order to steal the technology. So I'm really surprised to hear about that. To me, the culture is so stuck on isolation. This culture is so stuck on their great philosophies, well, on Confucianism especially, and this idea of patriarchal authority that they seem to be smashing through everything with their Communist Party. I'm just totally surprised that they're able to excel in any of those innovative things, whereas the U.S. has been all about what's new, to the point of we're eating ourselves. The United States is like the snake that's eating its own tail, as far as I can see. So there's my 2 cents. Manu has his hand up. Are there any other comments going on here before Manu gets it back again? I see you grinning, Richard. Are you just doing your R&R, or are you thinking a thought?
No, well, I was thinking earlier on in terms of the notion of cultures and the reference to Western, and what it brought into my mind of do we have a good baseline understanding of what we mean by Western? Because I'm never quite sure about Western. I think about Western in a science context, and when I think of Western in that context, I'm thinking of those who evolved the science of the machine metaphor, the notion of the mechanical sort of preciseness and so forth, and And that only goes up to the beginning of the 20th century. After that, the developments that have occurred are nowhere near a parallel to the Western science of a machine metaphor. And it's a science that in North America anyway, and I think maybe other places, has paid very little attention to the developments that have occurred in so-called Western science, to the point where I end up thinking of Western science as pre-20th century science, and it has a certain kind of metaphorical connotation. And I think of post modern science is the science beyond the 20th century, or during the 20th century and beyond. And that gets us into the very things that Bucky was talking about, the importance of connections and interconnections and flux and flow and all the kinds of things that was denied in the early days of Western science. And some of the work that I've been doing recently, the headlines of some papers are that indigenous science or knowledge keepers are not catching up to Western science. It's the other way around. Western science is finally catching up to either the 3,000 years of cultures that you're talking about, or we've been talking about, or the 60,000 years of the Aboriginal people. So I just come back to saying that Western science to me is not a culture in the same sense that it is a culture in the history of countries or peoples or tribes. So that was my interest, was do we have a Western science baseline that we can then carry on the dialogue vis-a-vis what the point that Manu was trying to get across, and the question of whether is China really a nationalist, isolationist culture based on the evidence that you were talking about, Steve, where in fact at one point they did exactly what you said they did. They tried to close themselves off, or at least appeared to be doing that. Maybe it was fake. Maybe it was a diversion to make us think that's what they were doing. In the meantime, they're going down another trail trying to dominate the world, let's say. They're going to end up with a Chinese empire that dominates the world, maybe technology-wise or other kind of development-wise. But anyway, that's my R&R comment.
So Manu, do you have continue with your thought if you want?
No, I just wanted to give a certain fact in regard to the two key things that you said to me, that you said at the beginning, that history books are written by the victors.
Mm-hmm.
And that the second one was history books are written by the victors, and then about the perspective of China. But let's just take it some other point. If I say to you Timbuktu, what do you say?
I say hallelujah.
Susan, have you heard about Timbuktu?
Timbuktu, I would say Africa.
Well, what is it?
It's a country.
Ubuntu.
It's a place.
Okay, let me tell you what Timbuktu is. Oh, Richard, yes?
Well, I was going to say what Ubuntu is to me. And Ubuntu is to me exactly what Fuller said, is self and otherness, and without otherness, you cannot have self. And Ubuntu is simply, in what I've learned in the last several years, it means something along the line of, I'm losing the phrase now, but it's like, we are because we are together.
It's a communal, yeah. I was misunderstanding you. I thought you said something else. That's what I was saying Ubuntu, which is something that Nelson Mandela talked about, and that's it's things about, but you're talking about Timbuktu.
No,
Yes.
he's talking
But-
about Ubuntu.
No.
Timbuktu.
Timbuktu.
Oh,
'Cause
Timbuktu.
I knew, yeah, that's, I thought you said Timbuktu as well, because Ubuntu is, I mean, one, it's
Ubuntu.
Okay, okay. What is the dark ages in Europe? In Europe, how do you call? When is the period of what do you say? Dark ages. When was it?
Probably 1000 AD to, to the 1350s or 1400s. So probably
Good.
2000 years
Yes.
of church control that squished everything.
You're as good as I expect, Steve. I expect. Right. Now, let's just look at this. Timbuktu is the preeminent center of culture, of science for the whole Western Europe, Africa, entirely. Go to Wikipedia and see what it says. So scientists in Europe, especially France, Italy, they came to Timbuktu to study. And they went back. That is one fact. But it is dead today, especially in regards to Africans. It's dead. Right? Because history is written that way. Because history that we were taught start from Magellan and Columbus. That's one. Secondly, we talk about the pyramid and all of these things. Where are the most famous pyramids, Susan? You know Egypt.
Egypt, which is part of Africa.
Is it in upper? Is it in mid? Or is it in lower Egypt? When they say lower Egypt, is the delta. Mid Egypt is Memphis. Upper Egypt is towards Sudan. Where is it?
It's in the low,
No,
in the delta.
no. The most ancient pyramids are in Upper Egypt. Right?
Where's Upper Egypt? I don't understand. Are we upside
Okay,
down?
okay. You have from Africa, from the Kilimanjaro, you know, that mountain thing that you hear about, where you have the Rwenzori, the Kilimanjaro. You have the Nile rivers that flow. The Nile rivers, you have the Blue Nile and the White Nile that meet in Khartoum in Sudan and continue north to the cataract, where you have the Aswan Basin, the Aswan Dam. Down, and they go into mid-Egypt, that is Upper Egypt, that side. Then down, mid-Egypt, and further down meander into the desert, to the delta area, where it goes, you know, in a vast delta into the Mediterranean. It's the longest river, the second longest or the longest in the world. Between Mississippi and the Nile, which is the longest? It's the Nile.
Yes.
Wow,
The
yeah.
Nile is the longer. It's longer than the Mississippi.
Is the Amazon longer than both?
No, Amazon is the most powerful river in the world. It is huge. Remember that Africa is only second to Asia in terms of landmass. All right? So you're talking about getting from, you see the DRC, you see the forest to the northeast of DRC.
Mhm.
Where?
That's where it starts.
ERC, right in the middle.
Yes, it is huge. Okay, but what I wanted to say is that who were the inhabitants of Upper and Mid Egypt at the time of the pyramid? Who were they?
Namibians?
The Bantus.
Bantus, okay.
It was us. We got moved by Islam.
Mhm.
When let's just say Arabians start coming, invading Egypt, invaded dynasties. Cleopatra, she was black, isn't it? How come that she was black? Ramses was black, isn't it? The mummies are there. So that's what I'm saying, is that beware of being trapped in a phase. Now, those are two facts. Let's come to
Beware
today
of what? Beware of what?
Being
of
trapped.
being trapped in a phase. As a principle, we say there are cycles. A cycle is made of many phases. Beware of being trapped in a phase. You see that where it starts? Okay. Now, let's go now to the third thing that I wanted us to understand. What we call today inflation. Question to you. Is inflation real?
Well, is money real? Are you
Right.
asking a trick
That's
question?
the bigger, yeah, that's the bigger question, is money real?
The question is, inflation, is it real?
Well, it's real at Costco.
Meaning that is inflation an energy?
No, no.
Okay. So if inflation is not real, and Milton Friedman said it clear, is and always a monetary effect.
Mm-hmm.
It is a theft.
Right.
Inflation is a theft. Okay?
It is. It makes everybody.
It's a
poor.
theft that is organized, that is recognized, and we have been made to believe into it. That's where the belief comes. If you take anybody that is born that is 50 today or 60 or whatever, we say inflation is natural. Inflation is no nature. It is a belief. And the belief, we confuse the consequences of believing something with the essence of a thing. When you say the value of a house or the price of your house has changed, has it really changed? No.
Comparison.
Yeah, it is just somewhere, somebody pumping air in the system and is expanding. Like it will deflate when that air ceases. The printing press, the printing of money has been actually of currency, because if you really want to determine what is money, it is something that in addition to being a currency, that is something that favors change, is a storage of value. Because we live on credit. Credit is real, right? We cannot consume everything that we produce or that we harvest. Therefore, we have to keep it somewhere or to lend it to somebody in exchange for a return. That is it. But you cannot confuse that with the term of that exchange.
Well,
Yes, Richard.
well, I guess one of the things I'm thinking about now is what is real? And you asked the question of, is inflation real? The answer we're saying is no. But then we ask the question about culture, or we ask the question about belief, and in particular belief. Is belief real? And
No.
yes, I would say it is. Belief is real, and belief is a governor. It governs what we do. And if we are guided by so-called wrong beliefs, that doesn't take it away from being a real belief. And very often what we're trying to do is to, like Bucky, we are value driven, and value driven to me is belief driven about something that we think will benefit humanity, 100% of humanity. if we are belief driven by the Malthusian concept, then we will believe that there is scarcity and not enough to go around. And that belief will drive us into the brink. So that I'm just going to put that out in terms of, I think belief is real. Now, I want to go back to one other thing, and this is just a curiosity of mine. If the Egyptians or the Africans built these great pyramids when they did, my question is, why did they build square-based pyramids and not triangle-based pyramids, so that the concept of patriarchy is diminished or removed, because a square-based pyramid can only symbolize hierarchy, the way in which it's structured. A triangle-based pyramid, the tetrahedron sort of polyhedra, polygon, can symbolize multi-sector or rotating hierarchy, and there's always stability. So it's just a curious question, is why were square-based pyramids built when they were built and not triangle-based? I'm curious, that's all. I put it out as a question.
I want to measure in on that one right away, because to me, it's, if you look at a double tetrahedron or a Merkaba, the octahedron that's implied in a tetrahedron becomes manifest in a double tetrahedron. And so that octahedron is the half of the pyramid that's showing. The pyramid actually went down. So the octahedron is actually the symbol in the Kabbalah. It's a symbol in Native American spirituality. It represents the visible part of the octahedron. So I just want to put that out. Now, I also want to say we're miles off of our conversation, but if everybody's enjoying this, I'm willing to go with it. So
Can I just say, add two things to
yeah,
John's questions?
if we're going to put more on the table, let's put it on the table. I'll keep track of what's out here and let's see if we can
No,
resolve
I
it.
just want to try to answer his questions.
Okay.
Okay. Your
Well,
first question,
here.
John, Richard, was why did they build pyramid with square bases? Why were the pyramid built in the first place? For what?
What?
Why were the pyramid built? What was the motivation?
Well, who knows that?
For burial.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay,
I mean, that's
let me say,
assumed to be true, but that is not.
no, hold
necessarily
on, hold on.
Yeah.
If I take the Bantu culture, the very highest in the beliefs is death and after death. That's true all over Bantu. But let me elaborate to why I say it is. If, let's just assume that it was to bury royalties that were believed to be deity. A pharaoh was believed to descend from God and be a manifestation of God. Now, if it were to bury it, now, what is in geometry the inner sanctum of the pyramid? And I get to what Steve said, is an octahedron, the heart of it.
Of a pyramid?
Yep.
Yeah.
Remember when you divide the inner sanctum that is not visible, but is representative of inner sanctum of a tetrahedron is an octahedron, especially of a double tetrahedron. If you consider that the tetrahedron that you see physically does not exist on its own, also always has a dual. When you put it, remember the dual is not this, the dual is this, right? So when you do those two, let me show you physically for you to be clear about what I'm saying. Here, That's where you have a Star of David and all of those things. Inside here, that is the heart of it, is an octahedron.
That's what I meant about a double tetrahedron or.
Okay, so let's continue. So if it is an octahedron and you believe that something is sanctified, where will you preserve it? A pyramid, read about it, learn about it, was built to conserve the mummies of pharaohs and of nobles. That's what it was there for. That was the belief. That's my first answer to Richard. You put the mummy in the octahedron at the heart of it for preservation. And they've succeeded in doing it because today we excavate those mummies that are 2,000 years old because of those things, because of that application. Now, in regard to belief, to say they are real or they are not real. Reality is that it's true everywhere in the physical space. That's what you call reality. Now, if you believe that a glass is full or a glass is half full or half empty, that's the belief. And those beliefs are antagonal. That is, they oppose each other. Does it change anything about the nature of glass?
That's still, it doesn't.
A bottle that is half full or is half empty is a qualification. It is the word, it's the derivative that we put onto it, but it doesn't determine the root of a thing. Let's be clear about that. If we find another use to the fact that the glass is empty, that is really translate the energy flow, then it means something. But to say this bottle is half empty or half full doesn't change anything in the bottle. It only changes if I start opening the bottle and I make water flow. Then the reality is changed.
And so what's your
That's
point?
real.
So what's your point there?
Yes, those are my two answers to Richard. But I really, this is really philosophical and it might take us too far.
It might.
My definition of a belief is a thought you keep on thinking. And that to me is a choice, and it hits on perception. And actually, Manu, sure, it could be some perception that is completely colored by things from outside your own sensation. It can be colored by culture, it can be colored by experience. But I do believe it's a choice. And so for me, belief is going to feel real. And that's the power of perspective, is when you get to escape the things that are just a pattern of thought and reconsider based on a reevaluation of, we're never going to understand reality 100% in this current incarnation. That's my belief. So it's that I keep thinking. I'm looking for serial closer approximations. And I find all the time that my beliefs get to change.
What happened then, Susan?
Hold it, Manu.
Approximate.
Hold it, Manu. Are you
Sorry.
complete? Are you complete, Susan?
Yeah.
And Richard wants to say something, and then Joe, you have your hand up too, right?
Yeah.
Let's rotate around Richard and then Joe, and then maybe if I have something to say, then we'll come back to you, Manu. Everybody gets a turn. Go for it, Richard.
I'm sorry. Okay. I wanted to grab, but that's okay.
Well, make a note.
Let me pull it. Let me.
It's Richard's turn, please.
Well, I mean, I like the expansion that's happening here to understand. Again, I'm trying to think right now in the geometric sort of way. And so if in fact, at the heart or the core of the half octahedron tomb is a tetrahedron, then what I would like to see happen in our educational world is more of an understanding of why why it was built the way it was. I understand the motivation and the wanting to preserve the belief that pharaohs were a descendant of God, which is the belief. But in terms of the visible polyhedron kind of shape, those pyramids represent half an octahedron that somebody can see. They're square based. And when you do things like Maslow's hierarchy and other kinds of things we've done, we model it off of the square based pyramid. And so you're forced into having to have a hierarchy. You can't get away from it for it to be stable. What we've been hearing and learning from Fuller's work is the importance of the fundamental minimum whole system is a triangle-based pyramid. And it has this other kind of mobility to it so that we can have multi sort of hierarchical sort of positions. So just in a family sense, father can be the head of something, mother can be the head of something, kids are head of something, grandparents are head of something, and you see the communal sort of interchange that Manu was talking about. And if we had a tetrahedron in the forefront of people's minds, they would see that, whereas what we've always been taught is the square-based pyramid and nothing about the depth, nothing about the inner workings, or the fact that there is actually a half an octahedron underneath. So you've got the full octahedron. So that's what I'm curious about, is how we reinforce what I think is a false sort of perception of how we can get along. And if we were teaching to the square or triangle-based pyramid, I think we'd get along a lot faster than teaching through a square-based pyramid. That's all I'm trying to get at, is for us to have been thinking about the significance and the symbolization, really, of those geometric sort of structures. I mean, you could ask, I'm sure, almost any school kid around the world, in my opinion, what is a square-based pyramid that was built by the Egyptians way back when? And I doubt if very many of them will say, well, that's easy, it's a half an octahedron. They might do it intuitively, but I don't think they will have done it because some teacher taught them that. They got taught something else. That's all I'm getting at. And that, to me, that's the importance of our discussing Fuller's work, because I think he was on the leading edge of stuff that, for the most part, people are still slow to catch on to, and they want to hang on to the belief that has driven their culture or their civilization over, whether it's 200 years or 60,000 years. So I'm all wrapped up with this idea of how powerful geometric thinking is in terms of whether it's helping us move forward or whether it's locking us into old ways and default ways of thinking about what's real and what isn't, and so forth. So thank you for that opportunity to share that.
Great. Everybody take notes on their comments and feedback. Joe, what's coming up for you? I love this conversation.
Me too. But I feel like I'm like way off and like where I was thinking, because I was actually a belief is to me, again, that is something that is accepted as truth. And that's the way I think that it may be your personal truth, but it's something that is accepted as truth. And the reason, and I'm only saying that this in the sense that I'm thinking about it in terms of like currency. And so we take it as the idea of currency is that this is something that's real, and that it's not real, but it's something that represents something else. It represents an exchange of goods and services. And to me, so there's a general acceptance that there's a trust that underlies that belief that you're going to make good if I give you a piece of paper, and this piece of paper is going to represent some level of value. And the only reason I'm thinking about it this in terms of his beliefs is that it's a way of signaling of what reality is, in a sense that if there's a shortage of something, then a price will go up. If there's no interference, if reality is not distorted, if the monetary policy doesn't get in the way. And yes, we distort reality through other policies, but in and of themselves, it has the potential to actually signal that something is occurring as far as economically is concerned, and that there's a shortage of something. That's why it's important to have it represent some reality as much as possible. And the only reason I'm just thinking of all these things is I'm trying to think about how these Bucky's principles fit into this, and I'm not clear on that. That's what I'm trying to kind of see, how our beliefs and Bucky's principles, because I see Bucky's principles as being something as like fact in a way, which is a little bit different than what beliefs are. And so I'm trying to just reconcile those two. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a little bit all over the place, but the idea that I'm thinking about this in terms of currency is probably not the right way to approach it. But it does symbolize an exchange of energy as well with money. I mean, there's that's a form of signaling as well. Anyway, I'm a little all over the place, but there's a belief that this thing actually represents something, and then there's fact, and that's a little bit different. And I'd say Bucky's principles are facts, and our beliefs are something else.
Are you complete?
I am.
Susan, did you have anything you wanted to throw into this conversation?
I'm good.
You're good. All right. I have a couple things I want to say, and I'm really frustrated with my inability. Normally, I can call up my resources instantaneously, and they're just not being called up because I have a perfect diagram of the octahedron representing the Kabbalah in terms of the 7 directions and the integrity of beingness and a human being. So let me say a couple things, and then we'll rotate around again and let everybody get through. Number one, I'm grateful for this conversation. I think that all too often we get stuck on reading the book and we don't get to pause and really integrate what I think right now, what we were talking about, are foundational. They are foundational to any discussion of Bucky and the real world. And they're very complicated. And anything that Bucky taught was metaphorical, in that it's impossible for a human brain to sense a 4-dimensional reality. And Bucky was clever enough to use the tetrahedron as a metaphor of taking those 4 90-degree angles. We all understand I have an X plane and I go 90 degrees from it to create a Y plane, and I go 90 degrees from it to create a Z plane, and I have 3D. but the brain can't go 90 degrees to that to create a W axis in order to understand a 4D reality. The brain can't do that. So Bucky took those 4 90-degree angles, made them into 60-degree angles, and voila, we now have a 4-dimensional model that can be perceived in a 3D representation, even on a 2D piece of paper, which our brain can grasp. So I think this conversation is essential, and I love that we're having it. Now, saying that, I want to comment first of all that maybe it is perhaps because, is money real? Well, money is based on belief, and faith. If I have faith in a particular system of money, it'll operate forever. When I lose faith, then the money system falls apart. And that's been proven sociologically and scientifically over the last 20 or 30 years. They did an experiment in Brazil, and we could do a bunch of research on that. So money is a figment of our faith, and therefore a figment of imagination. And it's all a rhetorical situation. And and I don't believe anybody here wants to get stuck in arguing which word is right. I have faith in each of us here. Is that faith real? Well, it is for me. That each of us are wanting to get to the profound depth of principle. And I think all of us can agree that Bucky's main contribution was that everything is energy, which is Einstein's contribution, by the way. And then Bucky took this everything is energy and then created this tetrahedron as a perfect metaphor of visible and invisible. And it's likely that Bucky understood spinors, which are electrons, which are the 720-degree rotational items, the half-spin items in quantum mechanics. Bucky probably understood those as good as anyone. But instead of getting involved in quantum mechanics and talking to Feynman and to those dudes, he said, hey, let's make a practical application of the principles of cosmic energy for the benefit of human beings. So that's what I think. Now, I think, Richard, I'm going to speak really, I've been so excited for you to come on the calls, and I've been so excited for you to participate in the conversation because you have been really looking to understand more deeply the concept of Bucky. And I don't know that I understand. You probably, I mean, you just won an award, dude. And you won this award by taking these principles that Bucky gave you and doing everything you could in your career to apply them into practical situations to benefit humanity. So when I speak to you, sir, I speak most humbly. You've done such a good work, and I really am honored. Honestly, I've been honored to be with you on these calls and with 52 Living, and now hearing about your award, I'm almost, I feel like Keanu Reeves, right? In, I'm not worthy, and I want to play Bavarian Rhapsody right off, and because I'm not worthy. But here's how I understand Bucky. Bucky was showing everyone how everything is energy and how that energy moves in precession. The precession evolves in cycles, and the precession is regenerative. And I think that in order for, to me, when I see this energy manifested in Native American tradition and in Hebrew tradition, and I think even in Norse tradition, it's the double tetrahedron that's the foundation of physical matter. Not the single tetrahedron is the beginning, and we're always talking about minimum of 2, and we can. So it's the double tetrahedron. Now we can talk about a single tetrahedron, concave and convex, and so I'm not pretending that I know anything about this, but I think, Richard, to answer your question, if we come out of the single tetrahedron paradigm, move into the double tetrahedron or the Merkaba, and then we see that instead of that octahedron being on its side and implied in a single tetrahedron as maybe the holy of holies in a tetrahedron, when you put the double tetrahedron to it, you now have a vertical upright octahedron that is very easy to say, okay, the outer extremity of that octahedron, that square that's manifested there as the boundary between the what can be seen and what is not seen, the visible aspect of the pyramid, and which hides the invisible aspect that's below ground. That symbol is the basis of Kabbalah and the basis of Native American. So by using a double tetrahedron, and as far as where did the pyramids come from, and my belief is the pyramids they're not there to bury pharaohs. There were way too many pharaohs and there are not enough pyramids. Somehow those pyramids, I'm more apt to believe the Stargate principle, that the pyramid was a landing field for a vehicle from outer space. So I really believe that more than I want to believe they're just burial grounds for pharaohs. So to me, the pyramid represents something really sacred. It represents a manifestation of energy. Back when I was 35, 40 years ago, I understood about a 42 degree angle pyramid, and I built one, and I took a box, and I took a 42 degree angle pyramid I made out of cardboard, and I put an egg in there underneath each one, and the one under the box got rotten, and the one underneath the pyramid stayed fresh. Somehow that pyramid, that octahedron, which is the essence of the double tetrahedron, does something with energy. So, and I don't know that any of us understand it or that I can understand it, but I think by sharing our perspectives, each of us can get more an in-depth comprehension and apprehension of potential, understanding that these interrelationships can only be imagined by mind. They are synthesized by mind. They cannot be grasped by my brain, right? I have to use intuition to see this. And in order to do that, I need to exercise compassion, and I need to listen and be open to paradigm. So I think the power for me is when I shifted from the tetrahedron to the double tetrahedron, and then started to consider the octahedron. I even have, I wish I could find and I will look for it and send it out, but I would like to share what I mean by graphically, what I mean by this. See, I've been looking, here's the octahedron. This is all I could find here. If we take this circle of the spherical energy of the tetrahedron or the double tetrahedron, the spherical energy of the octahedron, we put it in, this is a medicine wheel right here. This is the Kabbalah right here. And I wish I could find my diagram that was actually from the Kabbalah that shows the octahedron in the middle of a cube. So I wanted to show that. And then I want to show this. Here is the tetrahedron dissected to create the implied octahedron, the octahedron that's laying on its side. And then here is the double tetrahedron or the star tetrahedron or the Merkaba, which when that energy begins to, this is the minimum of 2 tetrahedra. When they start to spin, then the octahedron becomes a vertical manifestation of the energy of the 2. So these are, and I don't know that I know anything, but I want to contribute these things to the conversation. I'm going to look further for more of my stuff. So I just wanted to throw those in to kind of put in the pot to see how we go from here. I'm complete. Manu, you're next up on the rotation. So if you want to go for something,
please, I want to ground some very, in my opinion, simple things. This is a minimum structure, right? We all agree to it. But this minimum structure that you see manifestation that way is derived from 4 fields.
From 4 what?
Fields.
Fields?
Yes, I have 1 sphere, 2 sphere, 3 sphere, 4 spheres.
Spheres.
That are closely packed. Don't look at the physical sphere. Think about it and have the double torus all around it, the field, the spherical influence of it.
Yeah, I can actually show you a graphic on that if you
No,
want.
wait.
I think we got it.
So this one has the influence, that one, that one, that one. And it is the intersection of all of those fields that provide those red lines. So the tetrahedron itself is a manifestation of 4 things. Things are stars, things are spheres. Their interaction result into something in a particular setting that is the closest packed spheres, which outline of the Kerr, the heart of it, is the tetrahedron. Do we see that clearly?
The heart of the 4 spheres is the tetrahedron.
Yes, the heart of the influence of the 4 sphere. When Bucky represents a tetrahedron, it takes 4 spheres that he put together and draw lines between the center of those 4 spheres. And they make a tetrahedron. Clear? That's why it is a minimum structure. It's a minimum structure because you bring these 4 closest and their mutual influence defines a common zone. That is a tetrahedron. Right?
Right.
So that's one. Second, Steve, you have been talking about the double tetrahedron. There's no double tetrahedron. There is duality of tetrahedron, which doesn't mean double tetrahedron. Let me explain what I mean. You see this structure?
Yeah.
It is 2 tetrahedra that come together. Do you agree?
It's a double tetrahedron, right?
Okay. No, it's not a double tetrahedron. Let me explain again. Let me take a physical thing too for you to understand this.
Okay, well, that's
When
what
you have a pole.
that's what I'm calling a double tetrahedron. So what's a double?
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying I'm correcting. When you say a double tetrahedra, it translates something that can be misleading. If you have a pole and you have wind or tornado, in which position does the interaction of a pole and a tornado make, or the wind make the pole most vulnerable? What direction of a wind? Horizontal.
No.
So the maximum influence of 2 things doesn't come like this. It comes like that. So when 2 tetrahedra interact to fuse into something creative, meaning the octahedron that is inside there, they come at 90 at precision to each other at 90 degrees angle. So if you take every of the apexes of this tetrahedron, this one, like my fingers, you project it to the surface of the other triangle, it comes at 90-degree angle to the center of gravity of this other tetrahedron. Now, this center of gravity is somewhere here. It's 2/3 to the height. Do we see that? I made a construct here. The center of gravity of this tetrahedron, this one here, that is somewhere here, where my finger is.
Oh.
Right? Is 1/3 to this base and 2/3 to the apex here, to the vertex here. So if I take each of these transverse tetrahedron, and I project to that, it comes at 90-degree angle to the stuff, that vertical. That's what creates the diamond. And the German, when you study algebra and the theories of set, this is called the Kerr, K-E-R-R. I guess it's from German, to mean heart of things. And the heart is living. Your heart in you is pumping, right? It is living, it's your living engine. So that is it. Now, coming to, I think that this is, in my opinion, foundational to many things that we talk about. And then now, let me take something that is, this was my first idea in relationship to the geometrical foundation of what we've been discussing. Was that clear a little bit? I want the feedback there.
Yes, you're clear in the way you
Okay.
constructed the notion of the 90-degree angle. But in order to have the 90-degree angle, you had to have 60-degree angles in a minimum tetrahedron, and they have to come together. And so
In a certain
some
way,
ways
right?
what you're talking about, which may be very, very helpful in the sense of trying to resolve the notion of the 90-degree XYZ and the 60-degree tetrahedral. And we run the risk of getting into binaries that if 60 degrees is right, then 90 degrees must be wrong, or vice versa. Now you seem to, what's helped for me is you've articulated the notion of 90 and 60 working together. And that's pretty exciting to think about angles that seem to be in opposition to each other, now working with each other to form even a more complex, if you want, whole. So thank you for that. That's
And you say something very interesting, Richard. 60 degree has to do with volumes.
no, it doesn't just have to do with volume.
Hold on, let me just tell you. 60 degree, geometrically in your environment, determines equilateral triangle. Do you agree?
Yeah.
If I have 3 triangles, that is a minimum form. 60 degree, 60 degree, 60 degree. Now, if I want to make something that is now in a higher dimension, I cannot start taking big things and putting with minimum to realize a minimum in a higher dimension. So I have to build the tetrahedron with triangles. That's why the tetrahedral form at the higher dimension is made of triangles. That's why I say 60 degree is related to volume.
Yes.
Determine the minimum volume. That's the why.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, the 90 degree is in relationship to what you don't see, which is orthogonalization. It's called orthogonalization. That is projection. Orthogonalization means projection. When you take on a plane, if you have x-axis like this, and you take the y-axis that exists, when you project orthogonally the y-axis to the x-axis, it goes to the origin, to 0. You have no information.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Remember that information is in the lab. Anything that is at angle means that there is a residual. There's an impedance to purity.
Yeah.
So precession is at 90 degrees. There's nothing left. Everything is used to something. Do we get that? 90 degree has to do with orthogonalization, and orthogonalization is projection. If I project at an angle that is less than 90 degree or more than 90 degree, there is a component that is projected there. There is an influence. If I project at 90 degrees, it's pure. The interaction of this and that will be pure, will be a pure resultant, precessive. Action, reaction, resultant. When you represent those two in geometry, you always represent action here, reaction Like that, no? You remember? You don't make the direction opposite. It's there. And then there. I'm talking about geometrical representation. Although in terms of effect, it can be understood to be like that. That they annul each other. If I press on this table, it's going to be pressed vertical. The two are going to be annulled, right? So it is precessive. But if I press like this at an angle, it results something there at an angle too. I want this to be understood. Now, that was the first principle that I wanted to put. That the octahedron is actually secret. It's sacred. That's why it is mystical. And that's why it's the tomb of a pharaoh. But this is this is politicking. Now let's go to the second thing that I want to say in terms of belief and geometry. Let's put it. How do we think? We think by dividing. Do we agree? If I give this to Richard, this, you see this? This is a calculator, right? If I show you like this, it's just a black pouch that you see. If I divide it, I open it, I make it in two parts. You see that there's a calculator, actually in three. You see that there is in between sandwich, the calculator itself with its head and tail and around. And then I have the left and the right cover, right? So thinking is dividing first, and then second, taking the parts and try to put them together to make a meaning. Now think about this. We keep on, our only basic foundational intellect is to divide. Is the awareness of the otherness that is dividing all the time. A system divides the whole between the inside and the outside and the boundary by the boundary of the system. So if we keep on doing that, that goes up exponentially, right? The part, it becomes dynamic and very diverse. Do we agree to that? Mm. Now, you, Richard, you are a whole. What is the chance that the part that you choose of those trillions of parts that have been made, that you choose to make something is right? You are thinking of something. Richard, you want to build Manu. And there are so many parts out there that you have to take to build Manu. What is the chance that the part that you are going to choose are going to fit the reality of Manu? Yeah. I would say very minimal. Thus, heuristics and beliefs. You have chosen something that is real. Those parts that you are choosing are real. In order for you to build something that you think is genuine in what you are thinking. But if it were exactly what you are thinking, the consequences of it will match the basic premises. In other words, they will be in sync. But because you genuinely, you have your experience, Richard, is very small in relationship to nature, to reality, not even nature to universe only, because nature is much bigger than universe. So in that reality, in that universe that we know, the thing that we know, your chance to choose the correct, to build something that holds is very minimal. Now, what you have built, that is the convention that you have put, is your belief. You sincerely believe that it's going to deliver what you intended for. But since it's imperfect, it's not going to. It's going to work for a while, for examples that are closer to you. But very soon it will diverge. And that we call noise around. Because is virtually impossible. And mathematically, you can derive a function, whatever function. This is a general principle in analysis, in functions. If you take any function of anything and you derive it, you find a derivative. Now, when it comes to integration, it's never complete. That's why there's always a constant that you add. Say a function, take a polynomial, right? F of x is x cubed plus 2x plus 5.
Not x cubed. X to the third power.
Yes. So if I take the derivative of x cubed is 3x2, x to the power of 2. The derivative of x squared is x. What about the constant? Constant vanish because derivative of constant is 0. Now, when I take those parts, those derivatives, can I ever take 0 and have those components and come back to the original function 0? I don't know. There's always a constant, which is a convention that we put to say there is something that is missing in our reconstruction. Okay? So a belief can never be real, fundamentally. A belief is always valid for a period of time. It is in cycle, and actually is in phase. You get my point?
I really
A
think
belief is in phase, not even in, is further deepen in. It
Well,
is in the phase.
and I think that's important for all of us because you're using reality as if it's static. And real means static. But I don't mean real to mean static. I mean real in the sense that my belief is real. You can't take my belief away from me. You tell me it's not real, because then you diminish me, you denigrate me, you dismiss me. So that's why I think when we're saying, so belief is real, it may not be real in the same way that is to the other person, but real is real.
Are you real? Are you real, Richard?
Am I real?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm real.
Oh, Becky said you're not real.
Well, I mean, I don't think we want to go too deep in this because now we're talking semantics and we're talking different kinds of things. But anyway, when it comes to my turn, I have something. I want to go back to the dollar sign, the money issue, because something happened to me. I don't know if it's an epiphany or not, but I'd like to share it with you when it gets to be my turn.
Well, and here's the thing, we got 8 minutes before the end of the appointed time. So one way to do this is to say, okay, let's have takeaways. And Richard, would that be okay if you shared that in your takeaway?
Sure.
All right,
Sure.
wonderful. Unless we want to all vote to extend this meeting 15 minutes, it's now time for takeaways. So let's do takeaways. Susan, how you feeling and what's your takeaway?
I am enjoying the flow. And I just love seeing that we're thinking and using geometry at the same time. So that's the whole point of critical path is geometry of thought. So Richard, how do you feel and what are you taking away?
Well, I feel great. And my takeaway is perhaps in what I just sort of suggested is an epiphany for me, but it has to do with what Joe was talking about and what we were talking about money. And then I went to tensegrity and I went to the principles of compression and tension. And I looked at the idea of bartering, and you have one thing, somebody has another thing, and you want to exchange it in order to benefit each other in a sense. And in that exchange is the tensionality of integrity. So the barter items are compression in my mind now, and the exchange is tensional, and that's invisible in some ways. So what we have done is we've created a tensional sort of factor or thing, so to speak. And that thing right now is called money or currency. And so what my epiphany was is to say that money is tensional, tensional. It's the symbol of the exchange. And Joe used the language of saying it's a symbol of an exchange of energy. And that reinforced my sort of emerging epiphany that money represents the tension in between, the connection between, and we put some kind of manifest entity to symbolize that. And right now it's called money or it's currency. So money and things to barter, exchange, are set on the principles of tensegrity, of compression and tension, and how those things work together in a way that is satisfactory. Or if they aren't working together, then they stretch to the point of breaking, or they're not working right. And so we would have to, at some point, which we have done evolutionarily, we've come up with different kinds of symbolic exchange items. Money is one, gold is one. Before, maybe it was just the exchange of one trinket for another trinket, and somehow or another, we trusted that they were equal, or we got the benefit out of that we wanted, even if it wasn't equal. We wanted that, and we were happy to exchange the cow for the camel, kind of thing. So anyway, that's my epiphany. I thought all of a sudden our discussion turned into the principles of tensegrity and talking about compression and tension and bartered items and dollars being the tension items. And that's my big takeaway. I'm so happy just to have had a chance to think of it even at this level. I'm going to have to think about it more deeply and get more input from meetings like this to see whether or not there's anything to it.
Want to pass it on?
Joe, yeah, how are you feeling and what are you taking away?
I'm feeling very good. I appreciate everybody's contributions. I actually really very much liked listening to everyone and hearing their thoughts and taking them in. My takeaway is that I need to really think about where Bucky's principles are being applied. We apply them. And some people apply them for sure. But when I was asked how China applies them, I struggled to really answer that because I see it as a very materialistic society. And that's fine, that's what it is. But applying Bucky's principles to that is very difficult. And I don't see it necessarily as a regenerative system that they're functioning under. So my challenge is to myself is to see how Bucky's principles are being applied in certain parts of the world, not just China. And that'll actually help me expand my consciousness. The other thing is actually, I think also trying to reconcile some of Bucky's principles with Ray Dalio's. And I think that would be that's actually a very interesting exercise as well. I think that they both adhere to the idea of generalized principles and to that they are how they guide your actions in the world. And I think that that's, you know, but I think they overlap in certain areas, and then there's some areas where they may differ a little. And I think that that's obvious. I have tremendous respect for both of them, so I think that that would be a cool exercise. And I even started thinking about some of the things, some of Ray Dalio's principles while we were sitting here, and trying to think about how I would reconcile those with some of Bucky's principles. Ephemeralization is actually one of those. I think can be there's a relationship there, a very strong relationship in the sense that they're both based on productivity. So that's just one example. Anyway, those are my two challenges: to see where Bucky's principles are really being applied on a national level, and to see how it reconciles with Ray Dalio. And I think that in any of these discussions, it's the questions that we walk away with that are actually much more important than the answers. So I have two big questions, and hopefully at some point soon I'll be able to get feedback from this great group on those ideas. So with that, Manu, how you feel? What are you taking away?
I feel great. Okay. Yo.
Even though it's
Did I grab again?
What's that?
Did I untimely grab again?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
that's okay.
Okay. I feel humble and grateful. Grateful first as the honesty of expressing point of views and feeling in this forum. And that to me is of great value. It's not every day that you find a place where you can safely say things that you believe are true to you and take risk. So for that, I'm very grateful and thankful for all contributions here. My very big taking away is from Steve again, from what he said. History. And then Bucky says, the word is the first industrial tool ever invented by man. Industrial means can be standardized. That's what industry means. When you say industrial tools can be standardized, as opposed to just artisan doing his craft. Right. So, and Kelly say, words are leading indicators. So, beware of misnomers. We communicate first and foremost in words, and we can be made to believe words and meanings that are not intended to be exactly like that, and becomes political and ideological. In actual fact, that is actually the origin of ideology. Ideology is getting stuck into one way of seeing things, ignoring the reality of ever-evolving universe. The second thing, and in response to Joe's comment about Ray, Dalio, and Bucky, but maybe you have forgotten that both of them delve in history. I mean, we studied the two books that we studied, The Grunge of Giant, and which one again do we study? Steve, help me.
Discipline, design discipline. Design
Utopian.
Utopian Oblivion.
Yes. in both of those books, how far in the past does Bucky goes to explain what it means today and what it means for the future? Very far. He was talking about Charlemagne, about Roland, about all of these things. Guy, that is what? At least 800 years ago. Right. So the word is important. And we should always strive. And then Ray says he trusts history because there might be things that haven't happened in lifetime, but he knows that they happened in the past. So history will always teach us about the future. And history, together with our ability to question, that is to divide,
All right.
is the most powerful tool that we have.
Yeah.
Right? And so we should always try to genuinely choose our words and be ready to question ourselves about what we say and accept that we're wrong here or we're right there with humility. To me, that is a powerful personal tool to progress and to doing whatever I want to do. I have a lot more to share, but that's my biggest takeaway. So for this, Steve, how do you feel? What do you take away?
That covers everybody, right? I'm so engrossed in this conversation. I'm grateful. Thanks, Manu. Listen, I'm really in deep gratitude that each of you guys are here and that I notice nobody else is here today. And I feel like this conversation that we're having right now is just super foundational. And to have Richard, who has every excuse to be exhausted after his weekend, he's hoarse from talking, and he has every excuse not to be here, and yet he busted his knuckles and busted a couple of links to get here. So, and then to have this great conversation going on, I just think is so profound. So, Richard, I'm just grateful that you're here sharing with us, and Manu and Susan and Joe. Wow. How cool that each of you are here contributing. I hope this happens next week. I would like to continue. It'd be really a thrill if everybody kind of brought questions back, because this is all about coming to a kernel understanding. And I remember, again, I'm remembering that in a video, Bucky's got his vector equilibrium cube octahedron up there, and he's starting to go through his jitterbug thing, and somebody says, wow, Bucky, this understanding the tetrahedron is very important. And Bucky just looks shocked. He goes, very important. It's all there is. I mean, the guy was just so topological in everything that he did. And I have to say that right now in my life, Manu has the most topological brain that I've ever experienced. And Manu, you continue to blow me away all the time. And I have to see you as a walking, talking metaphor. And I think that, yeah, you brought up that words are the first industrial tools. And of course, the other thing that I believe about words is that they're all lies, that rhetoric can get in the way so much. And what words do is support somebody in a conceptualization. I'm going to be pondering that an octahedron is the result of orthogonalization or perpendicular projection on the vertices in a structure. I'm also going to just remind that just as the minimum forms a triangle, the minimum structure is a tetrahedron. Nothing is a minimum structure. So everything is made of multiple tetrahedra. So I'm keeping that in mind as I pursue too. I wish we had time to open up Susan's brain and go into Atlantis and where those damn pyramids actually came from. and get past all of the westernized and modern conceptions about where the pyramids, what the pyramids are, understanding that there are structures in Egypt and there are structures in the Mayan culture that go right along with those pyramids, and there's a lot going on there that's 11,000 years old. We got nothing to understand about it. And to have Richard bring up a 60,000-year-old tradition of Aborigines, wow, how the world needs that paradigm to get an understanding of what is going on. For me, it all comes down to this. Everything is energy.
Mhm.
Everything. So anything is not real. It doesn't matter what it is. Anything I apprehend, comprehend, intuit is imagined by me, because everything is energy. And I really, to me, I have any of you can do this anytime you want to, but I just really want to share this. This is a tetrahedron. These dots are apprehended by the brain, which construes energy as some kind of reality. Your dots are different than my dots. And beliefs are interrelationships between these experiences that I have here. So we have happenings over here, ABC. We have interrelationships, which includes beliefs. It includes money. It includes Zoom. It includes words. Those things are intuited. And this is our, and to me, it's about compassion. It's about sharing. It's about patience with myself, as I grok the immense compassion that is on this phone call right now. It's like I'm overwhelmed with heart vibration, which is the reality I think that all of us experience and want to experience more on the planet. So, wow, I'm just so excited. And we've gone 11 minutes over as it is. I think that I think Joe is over there. He's studied a Ching. He studied the Tao Te Ching. He studied Confucianism. Over the last couple of years, this guy's been conducting meetups on those topics. So like he is like knee deep in looking at the nuts and bolts, the A, B's and C's and D's and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6s of that culture. And for him not to find the words to communicate, to me, is totally normal. Joe, you got to be more patient with yourself, and and we'll help you and you help us. And eventually you'll get there and be able to manifest all those interconnections you've been putting together. And no wonder you can't find words, dude. You just have so many freaking dots and so many freaking interrelationships. And as it is with all of us. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
You bet.
Nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks. By the way, guys, do you hear about the Odyssey on rafters
The what?
between Alexandria and Guatemala? I think it was Guatemala. In quest for the explanation of the pyramids in the Maya culture. And how did it go? And then they made an experience of sailing on rafters and just using wind and current.
Wow.
From Alexandria, and they landed right there.
And there are pyramids in China. There are pyramids in Europe. There are pyramids all over the world. And I'm not interested in arguing with anybody. I am delighted that there's many possible explanations.
Right
Or
on.
look at the age of those pyramids, Susan. We're talking about the age.
Question.
Exactly.
Yeah. And often information may be censored.
Yes. Well, since we derive, let's just say our influence a lot of time from our environment, that is what we inherit.
Yeah.
That's true in the world.
Yeah. Manu, make your notes, bring them up next time. The ground rules are we're complete.
Good.
And I'm hoping to share in between all week long. And then we'll come back
Yes.
again on Saturday. And I hope and I know for sure the right people will be here. I'm so excited. This is the conversation I wanted to have for a long, long time, is really getting to this nitty gritty. So thank you all. Okay. See you next week.
Thanks
Yes,
for
guys.
the.
Bye.
Bye-bye.